Today's topic is coming out from the shadows, which may sound a bit dramatic, but that's what it really feels like. Every year that I cared for Lance, I found myself more isolated than the previous year, and my world became smaller all the time. The last few years that I cared for him, about the only things that I did on my own were go to the gym, go to appointments, and run errands. I didn't even really have time to go have lunch with my friends, maybe once or twice a year. So if I wanted to spend time with my friends, they had to go to the gym with me or go for a walk, or I didn't get to see them. Now I have the time, but I'm finding it hard to get out and do things. I felt invisible for so many years. It's quite an adjustment now to be out in the open instead of hidden behind Lance's wheelchair. People actually see me now. And it may sound a bit strange, but most of the years when I pushed Lance in his wheelchair, people rarely looked up to see who was actually pushing him. I got so used to being in the background or being invisible that it's almost scary now when people see me. There's also the fact that the life that I was living then no longer exists. I'm having to redefine who I am and find my new purpose. I was part of Lance and RuthAnn for 27 years. Being just RuthAnn is like creating a new identity because no matter what people go through in their lives, we all change. Nobody's the same as they were 20 or 30 years ago. So I'm not the same person I was before I met Lance.
You seem to have done a really good job of integrating the pieces of you that were a caregiver and were half of Lance and RuthAnn into this new person that's just RuthAnn. Like you seem to have done or seem to be doing a good job of weaving those two things together. I've seen a lot of people handle loss over the years, and one thing I've seen is people try to do a complete 180 and leave every single bit of their past behind them and become someone completely different. And the thing about that is it doesn't really happen that way. You're always the sum of your parts. And what parts of being a caregiver do you feel like you've been able to integrate into your life moving forward to become a more well-rounded, even more authentic, more experienced person than you were before?
I don't even know if I could answer that question with what parts, because I am who I am today because of all the things that I've been through in my life. And I don't think it's possible to suppress who you are so that you can be somebody else. I just don't think that's possible. You might be able to fake it for a while, but those things are always beneath the surface. These are the things that make us who we are, and they're going to come out in one way or another. So what I've really been working towards is just healing the parts of me that I need to, and using what I learned to just be the best person that I can be. Like I said, I don't think that that I can really point to, I probably couldn't even point to 20 things of my life as a caregiver that I'm carrying forward, because I think I'm probably carrying it all and maybe just kind of working on those things that I know were problem areas. I am who I am. I was a caregiver for many years. I'm still a caregiver in many ways. I still have a tendency to try and take care of people no matter what situation I'm in. I'm working on that. That's something that I don't need to be doing. So
I think that answers why, for me, why you feel authentic, because when I talk to you and when I look at you, I feel like I'm getting the real you and not some shell or some image that you're trying to present, which is what I've often experienced when people do try to completely suppress their past and disregard it or not integrate it into their current person, or at least not acknowledge that that's part of them and it will always be part of them. And so you carry an authenticity with you that I appreciate so much. And I think it's a great example for people that are moving through those spaces. And one thing you mentioned was being hidden behind a wheelchair and not being seen. And you, I think, have done a really good job because I think you were purposeful about maintaining your individuality and your uniqueness, even while pouring your life into your husband. And so, what advice would you give to caregivers on how to maintain their individuality and their uniqueness while they are kind of pouring their life into someone else? Like, what things did you learn, or what would you have done differently in hindsight?
That's something that I didn't think that I really did very well. I thought that I completely lost myself. When Lance died, I felt like there was nothing left of me. And I know that a big part of that was grief. But while I was caring for him, I felt like I had given up so much of myself. I didn't know where I ended and he began, or where he ended and I began. I didn't even know how old I was. I couldn't tell you how old I was without first thinking about how old Lance was. And then I did the math and subtracted 2 years. Um, but then the more I started thinking about it, and this has just been a recent realization, the parts of me that I did maintain were parts of me where Lance and I meshed from the beginning. So I didn't actually completely lose myself. We had a lot of things in common. We both love reading. We both love photography. We loved nature. We love to travel. And those are parts of me that I realized recently were always there. I just always thought that they were Lance's because we always did that because those were things that Lance could do. So I did a better job than I thought I did.
I think that goes back to that being authentic. And that is one thing that I have always appreciated about you, is that I feel like I feel like I know you, and I feel like I don't have to dig through all these layers to get to the real you. And you're pretty good about just presenting who you are right up front. And I think that's really admirable. And it's taught me a lot about, being more authentic. Um, what you mentioned about, maintaining parts of yourself, and this is something that I have dealt with just as a mother. And you mentioned that, like, where do you end and he begins? I think that's a thing that a lot of people struggle with in their marriages, maybe in friendships or with their kids and parenthood. You give up so much of yourself and those lines get so blurry. That's why it's so hard, when people do struggle with empty nest, or they do struggle with a divorce, or the loss of a spouse, or the loss of even parents, right? And who am I now without them, or a best friend, or something like that. So I think it's a really good and useful thing to self-assess as you're in any relationship. Who am I? And make sure that you're keeping tabs on that, because while your relationships are important, they're they're not necessarily going to be there forever, but you're there for the sum of your life, right? The entirety of your life, day one to the last day, you're still there. And so you have to maintain those parts of you so that you can be the best version of yourself, not just for yourself, but even for people around you. You can continue, like you said, caring for others, maybe in a different capacity, but still being able to do the things that you love.
Right. And as a caregiver, that's really hard to do. It's really hard to find that time for self care. I had a hard time finding it. Like I said in the beginning, most of my time when I had free time, I went to the gym, I went to appointments, and I ran errands. I barely had time to spend with my friends. But looking back, I did the things that were myself. I went for a walk out in nature. I always had my phone or my camera with me, and I took pictures, and I went to the gym. I exercised. So I did maintain those parts of myself. And I think that to answer your original question, how to do that, my advice would be to any caregivers to really take that time for self-care and introspection, which I know it's not easy to find the time to do that, but it's so important to be able to look at yourself and to see what you are doing to care for yourself, because it does make a big difference too on a daily basis when you can look at the days and say, okay, I did that to take care of myself, instead of always saying, I haven't done anything for myself. I don't have any time for me. Because if you really look at it, you are doing things for yourself. It might not be the things that you really want to do, but you are taking care of yourself in some way.
And we've talked about that before, that self-care is often the hard things. It's not the fun things. It's prioritizing good, nutritious, healthy, nourishing food over junk food. That doesn't feel like self-care because it feels hard and not fun. And, I don't want to take my vitamins every day or eat my healthy, nutritious meals. I want to eat junk food and whatever, lounge around on the couch. I don't want to go to the gym and go exercise. I want to just sit here and be a lump. But truly, self-care is hard. It's not easy. It's the things that we should be doing for ourselves, the things we encourage our loved ones to do, right? It's the advice we give to people we love, the people we're caring for. So doing it for ourselves doesn't always feel like a treat. It really doesn't feel like a treat. It feels like work, but that's genuine self-care because you're doing what's best for you. And we had just talked about, you and I, relationships and making time for whatever's important in our life. And like you said, being introspective, taking time to really think, who am I? We have so many things screaming for our attention, not least of all the proliferation of social media that invades every single aspect of our lives, online shopping, we've got streaming media. So we have things all the time to distract us. And again, that seems like the fun thing to do when we get a break. If you get a 5-minute break, that's what you want to do, is kind of zone out. But maybe the best thing for yourself is to journal. It's to think about, what did I do today? And where am I with that? Where am I with this relationship? Where am I as a caregiver? Where am I with my other relationships?
Yeah. Well, I will say, as a former caregiver, that sometimes that 5 minutes of just zoning out is self-care. Sometimes that's what you need to do because you're so overwhelmed with everything going on around you. You haven't had any time for yourself, and it's a very heavy life. So to sit down and journal or to do one of those things that is good for you, sometimes you just need a break. So if your break is that 5 minutes of zoning out, then that's okay occasionally, but I wouldn't make that a habit. If you're really wanting to maintain parts of who you are, then you've got to do those things. You've got to look inward and you've got to do the work, even while you're exhausted, even while you're caring for someone else. And you mentioned journaling. I know I've mentioned that many times before. I journal all the time. That is one of the biggest things for me. And I'm so glad that I've done that for so many years. And Lance and I wrote letters to each other for the first couple of years that we were together. And I have all of those things. So I can look back and I can see, oh, yeah, these are the parts of me that I thought were missing. In fact, I actually went through my journals and looked back at some of these things. And that was how I realized that I didn't completely lose myself. So journaling is really, really important and probably the biggest thing that I did for myself.
I think that's awesome. And I think you're exactly right. That balance of knowing when you do need to take a break, because it is important to know when you need to. It's sort of like sleep, right? Making sure to prioritize sleep when you need it. And you can't always do that when you're caring for someone else. In fact, oftentimes you don't get the sleep you need. So it's prioritizing that if you do get an opportunity. But I think that's a really important point to make, that sometimes you do need that zone out, but that you need to make sure that you're also taking the time to take care of yourself. Take care of yourself.
Yep. Make yourself a priority. It's hard to do, but it's a really important thing to do.
You know, that's it is hard, but if you're not well and you're not whole and you're not um, taken care of, you certainly can't be taking care of the people that are relying on you.
Right. And I would say if you're at that point where you feel like you just can't do anything else, then ask for help. Go see a counselor, ask for somebody to come into your house and help you. You don't have to do it alone. In fact, it's easier if you do have help. And I know it's hard to ask for help too, but if you do get to that point, ask for help, and that's okay. Well, thanks for joining me, Jenna, and I will see you next time.
Thank you. We'll see you.